Hi, I'm Samuel C. Spitali, author of How to Win the War on Truth. In this video, we'll look at the truth about red baiting. The U.S. saw two red scares in the 20th century. The first was in 1917 to 1920 in the wake of World War I, and the second was just after World War II in 1947 to 1957. While there was some genuine concern about Soviet spies hiding in the U.S. or communist forces invading the country, much of the hysteria was driven by corporate and political opportunists abusing power through red baiting. Red baiting is a fear tactic used by the ruling class to discredit political opponents by calling them communist, Marxist, or socialist. The goal is to sow fear in the populace to get them to reject people or policies that threaten the powerful. Red baiting was one of the primary means that big business used to oppose unionization and New Deal labor reforms. It was wildly successful in dividing and discrediting labor movements. When workers formed unions to fight for better wages and safer working conditions, industrialists would intimidate workers by drumming up communist paranoia, to the point where union leaders would purge their most radical members to root out communist sympathizers. The more that workers were accused of being communist, the more fearful they became to engage in political action. To prove they were sufficiently pro-capitalist, they would align themselves with the very business interests they were organizing against. During the second Red Scare, red baiting became a political weapon, epitomized by Senator Joseph McCarthy in his witch hunt to root out non-existent communists in the U.S. government. Communist paranoia was so pervasive that over 10,000 people lost their jobs and hundreds went to prison, yet McCarthy never uncovered one single communist. Red baiting proved to be a useful cudgel for the political right, who used it to target New Deal supporters in the government, academia, and Hollywood, who were not only pro-labor, but also pro-suffrage, pro-civil rights, or pro-gay rights. The terms commie and communist were used to discredit anyone who threatened the power structure of corporations, patriarchy, or white supremacy. Red baiting even propelled Richard Nixon to Congress more than once. He originally got elected in 1946 by stoking communist fear, which earned him the nickname Tricky Dick, after he claimed his female opponent, Helen Douglas, was pink right down to her underwear. Why was she maligned as a communist, you might wonder? Because she opposed the witch hunting of Hollywood by the House Un-American Activities Committee, a panel on which Nixon served. Plus, her husband was Jewish, and communist fear-mongering was also a form of anti-Semitism, dating back to the time of Hitler, when communism was thought to be a Jewish conspiracy. During the 1950s and the 1960s, segregationists relied on red baiting to oppose the civil rights movement, which they called a communist plot, just as South Africans did to justify apartheid. Civil rights protesters were frequently called communist agitators, as was Martin Luther King Jr., even though King repeatedly preached against communism because he thought it was incompatible with Christianity. As the N-word became less socially acceptable, it was replaced with commie, which was used so often that 50% of Americans came to believe that the Communist Party was responsible for civil rights demonstrations. Everyone from Hitler to the KKK red baited in the name of white power. Cries of communism were shouted regularly at the NAACP, the United Nations, environmentalists, suffragists, and feminists, or basically anyone else who challenged the status quo. As women fought for the vote in the early 1900s, detractors called them communists, just as anti-feminist Phyllis Schlafly did to second-wave feminists in the 1970s to defeat the Equal Rights Amendment. Schlafly was a member of the far-right conspiracy group, the John Birch Society, which was backed by wealthy industrialists, and they imagined communist plots just about everywhere, like the fluoridation of drinking water intended to prevent cavities, or school desegregation. Both Big Tobacco and Big Oil have called government regulation communist for trying to protect consumers and the environment. And of course, red baiting was used to deny gay and lesbians government jobs and force them out of office during the Lavender Scare. Other so-called communist plots have included giving workers family leave, establishing a minimum wage, environmental protections, recycling programs, federally subsidized student loans, Social Security, public housing for veterans, anti-war protests, and even compensating coal miners for black lung disease. And of course, universal health care. In the 1940s, when President Truman tried to pass a national health care bill, the American Medical Association scared people into thinking it was a communist plot because they thought doctors might earn less money. And 7 decades later, in 2009, when the Obama administration tried to pass the Affordable Care Act, the healthcare industry once again scared people into thinking it was socialist. American presidents who have been accused of being communist include Dwight Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama. Wherever you find someone red baiting, smearing people as socialists, communists, or cultural Marxists, you can almost guarantee they're trying to undermine some policy that puts labor over business, people over profits, or the public good over private wealth. To read more, check out my book, How to Win the War on Truth. Special thanks to Alan Wincup for the illustrations, and thank you for watching.